Dillian the Body Snatcher right here. It's a champ. Big up to Sporting Icon. Subscribe. Otherwise, I might pay you guys a visit.
Okay, so over the last couple of weeks, I've been seeing some bits about who Dillian Whyte could be fighting next, and the name Otto Wallin seems to be popping up quite a lot from Otto Wallin's promoter, Dimitri Salita, and of course a couple of days ago from Otto Wallin when he did an interview with IFL, where he says he's pushing for that Dillian Whyte fight. These guys were supposed to fight some months ago. Obviously that fight fell apart because Dillian Whyte in camp, he damaged his shoulder. And we know that's true. Dempsey McKean was in there. I did a podcast with Dempsey McKean recently, and he said, yeah, that's exactly what happened. But anyway, is what it is. So that fight fell apart. So could we see Dillian Whyte versus Otto Wallin? Now, if that fight happens, great. Now, I know a lot of people are saying how Otto Wallin would beat him and all that kind of stuff, and Dillian Whyte doesn't have a chance. And if Dillian Whyte does fight him and does beat him, these very same people will go, well, Otto Wallin was having a bad night at the office or blah, 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 blah. Okay, there'll be some kind of excuse. Otto Wallin was a bum. You know how people go because Dillian Whyte's a matchroom fighter, right? Now, I'd be interested in that fight, and I'm sure a lot of you would too. But would it do anything for Dillian Whyte going forward? Because as we know, Dillian Whyte, he wants the Anthony Joshua fight and he wants another crack at the world title. Now, him fighting Otto Wallin, does it do either? Now, it could get him an Anthony Joshua fight because obviously he fights Otto Wallin, he beats Otto Wallin. Dillian Whyte's stock goes up because he defeated an Otto Wallin. For a lot of people, at least. Some people still criticise. But anyway, so yes, that would be an interesting fight for sure. And yeah, I'll be curious to see how Dillian Whyte gets on with a southpaw. I would, because as far as I recall, he's never actually fought a southpaw. I did interview Dillian and I asked him that question, and he couldn't remember if he fought a southpaw either. Anyway, it's what it is. So yes, that will be an interesting fight, no doubt. But is it ideal? What does it really do for him, really, towards world title shot? In my opinion, not much. It doesn't. So if it was possible for Dillian Whyte, if you want to get that world title shot, because again, before we talk about the world title shot, obviously Anthony Joshua has been a name mentioned that he could end up fighting in the summertime. So a rematch between Joshua and Whyte. I don't see that fight happening. Honestly, I do not see that fight happening because how the landscape is currently, things seem pretty obvious to me that that fight is not going to happen. It isn't. First reason, Dillian Whyte defeats Jermaine Franklin. On the build-up to that one, Eddie Hearn says to Jermaine Franklin, if you beat Dillian Whyte, you're guaranteed Anthony Joshua next. Guaranteed. So for Eddie Hearn to guarantee, when Eddie Hearn is not Anthony Joshua's manager, talks have to have taken place. Okay? So therefore, maybe Jermaine Franklin was always the plan. Maybe Eddie Hearn thought Jermaine Franklin was going to beat Dillian Whyte. Maybe he wanted him to beat Dillian Whyte. Maybe looking at that fight, Eddie Hearn felt he did beat Dillian Whyte. Okay, either way, Dillian Whyte gets the win, but Franklin still gets the Anthony Joshua fight. That's got to irritate Dillian, I'm sure. Now, could he fight Joshua in the summer? I don't think so. And the reason why I say I don't think so is because how the landscape currently is that Anthony Joshua, he wants a world title shot again. Currently, him fighting Jermaine Franklin is not going to get him a world title shot. Him fighting Dillian Whyte is not going to get him a world title shot. How things currently are. That can change. We'll talk about that in a second. So, Anthony Joshua, I believe, will take on Filip Hrgovic. I did a recent video on that. Go check it out. Okay? But just to quickly skim over it, the IBF have ordered Filip Hrgovic, the IBF mandatory, to fight for the interim world heavyweight title. Reason being, if something was to happen with a full title that currently Alexander Usyk has, i.e. Usyk-Fury fight for undisputed, they're going to have a rematch. Well, the IBF's already been ordered. As we know, that was ordered several weeks ago. That means that the winner of that fight will either have to vacate the IBF or get stripped. Okay, so they're going to have their rematch. Therefore, the interim champion for the IBF, Filip Hrgovic versus whomever, is going to become the interim champion, then elevated to full IBF World Heavyweight Champion. Now, currently, the order is Filip Hrgovic take on Andy Ruiz Jr. Andy Ruiz Jr., because he's next in line in the rankings, is not going to fight Filip Hrgovic. Reason I say that is because he's going to be fighting Deontay Wilder. We know that. That's been the order for quite some time. That's been the plan for the WBC and the PBC for quite some time. So Andy Ruiz Jr. is going to fight Deontay Wilder. not Filip Hrgovic. And he's going to fight Deontay Wilder for the WBC interim world heavyweight title and mandatory position. Okay? So therefore, Filip Hrgovic goes down the rankings. Who's next in line? Well, Deontay Wilder. We've just spoken about that. Wilder's going to be fighting Andy Ruiz Jr. Next in line then is going to be Anthony Joshua. Do you think Anthony Joshua, DAZN, Matchroom, 258, anybody around then is going to look at and think, okay, we can fight Filip Hrgovic for the interim IBF world title. If we beat Filip Hrgovic, which again is an in-house fight, by the way, although Filip Hrgovic is co-promoted by Matchroom and Wasserman, i.e. Sauerlands, we fight Filip Hrgovic, we beat Filip Hrgovic, we become the IBF interim world heavyweight champion. Fury, Usyk, have your fight. Winner's going to get stripped or vacated. Then I will then be elevated, as in Anthony Joshua will then be elevated to full IBF world heavyweight champion. So do you think that Team Anthony Joshua is going to turn down that opportunity to become world heavyweight champion again and then go fight Dillian Whyte instead? Personally, I'm cool if he does. I'd love to see that rematch, of course. But is he going to? No, of course not. He's going to take on Filip Hrgovic for the IBF interim world heavyweight title. That will be the summer fight, in my opinion. Okay? Again, one of the reasons why I know that, check out my latest interview with Kalle Sauerland a couple of months ago. We were talking about something very similar. Now, so for Dillian Whyte to get A world title shot, and B, an Anthony Joshua fight, well, he can kill two birds with one stone here, can't he? Fight Filip Hrgovic next. If Dillian Whyte fights Filip Hrgovic next, if he can get the green light from the IBF, of course, because currently there's still a negotiation period, so therefore Dillian Whyte might be able to slip in there, get the Filip Hrgovic fight, because he's ranked in the IBF, ranked number 10, I think it is off the top of my head. Therefore, he fights Filip Hrgovic, becomes IBF interim champion, then elevated to IBF world heavyweight champion, then he can defend that title against Anthony Joshua in the summer. Does that make sense? Or Dillian Whyte could go another route, take on Daniel Dubois for the WBA. The WBA is up next, so that is also a belt that will be stripped from the winner of Fury and Usyk, if of course they have their rematch. Currently, that would be Daniel Dubois. So take on Daniel Dubois now, get the regular belt, and then be elevated to WBA World Heavyweight Champion, if of course he defeats Daniel Dubois. Heavyweight division, you never know what's going to happen. But of course, when you look at Dillian Whyte versus Filip Hrgovic, when you look at Dillian Whyte versus Daniel Dubois, you can say based on Daniel Dubois' last performance, based on Filip Hrgovic's last performance, Dillian Whyte can beat him. Okay? Both of them looked very, very vulnerable, did they not? That could have been a bad night at the office, however. But interesting fights, you and I would watch them, that is for sure. Of course we would. So that is two quick routes for Dillian Whyte, in my opinion. Either fight Daniel Dubois, but again, if you fight Daniel Dubois, then I would imagine that will have to be a voluntary, and Frank Warren Queensberry will probably say to Dillian, well, you can have that fight, but you have to sign a rematch firstly, and maybe a multi-fight deal with Queensberry and BT Sport. Now, maybe Dillian's happy with that, maybe. He could be happy with that. I'm sure he's a little bit annoyed, a bit bemused as to why he's not getting the Joshua fight and Franklin is, and maybe a little bit annoyed with Eddie Hearn because as of right now, he still doesn't have an opponent or a date right now, okay? Maybe. I'm just presuming here. So maybe he might be quite happy to go on to BT Sport, take on Daniel Dubois, beat Daniel Dubois, then he can be elevated to full WBA World Heavyweight Champion, even though he's holding a World Championship in the regular belt. So there is that route. Or he could go to Sky Sports and fight Martin Bakole. Martin Bakole is currently ranked at the top end of the WBA. He is going to be ordered, as in Martin Bakole is going to be ordered to fight in an eliminator for the regular belt, the one that Daniel Dubois has. Maybe Dillian Whyte can fight Martin Bakole, beat Martin Bakole, and then get that shot at Daniel Dubois, or pick up the vacant regular belt once Dubois is elevated to full super champion. So there are some routes. But anyway, so back on to Otto Wallin. Yes, I would be interested in that fight. Does it do anything for Dillian Whyte's career as far as a Joshua fight or a world title? No, but it will shut a lot of people up. Dillian Whyte fights him, beats him, it will shut a lot of people up. But that's all it's going to do. Anyway, my thoughts, drop me yours, click thumbs up, subscribe. Catch you next video.